Well, yesterday, it was supposed to be last week, and she canceled it. And I was like, but I have a date. And so somebody even, because it was a couple of people that we've known for years, they're like, you need to get your next time. I'm like, I know. I'm just shocked. I was supposed to.
Working on it. Yeah.
It was supposed to be Tuesday.
Figure it out.
So you went. I went Wednesday.
That's
The day before.
in my mind.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So yeah, so it's going.
So I was like, hi, I'm not going to tomorrow. I was like, so at first when you were, at first I saw, I'm like, wow, it's like, it's got to be in the morning, right? And then as we were leaving, whatever time, older one, I was really impressed that the show was so similar.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was better too. Because if you like the movie,
Either way, so I tell them.
so watching it, because I feel like even guys watched it. I feel like it was just like a good movie. It wasn't yet. So yeah, it was like it was an easy one. You know, it wasn't like the best acting, whatever.
Tony's, but it was an entertaining show. I know. I was like, this Vegas.
Yeah, I'm like, they could have gotten the idea.
Right. You could have ended that scene.
Yeah. I can,
She's so cool, and I
right. It's like, hey, but now. But I think that issue got resolved, so it probably should be okay. But anyway, you never know. I mean, I'm happy that.
Good.
So I have like
So-
one last item, though, so, you know, but I can still pay for it, so no big deal. Okay.
someone who's good at it.
Yeah. No problem at all. Yeah, because I don't feel like
I wrote my script and I left.
I printed all my stuff and left it on my desk.
You gotta fill in these highlighted parts. With
He had to stay till 3, otherwise we were gonna ride together. But he actually, yeah, and I wanted to make it back to get the weekend started. But he came up on a mutual friend's plane. Wait, side by side. But yeah, so I texted him this morning. But yeah. So
Yeah, it was great to read all about it today.
were they talking all about him, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk in articles, you know,
Nothing negative, right?
not about him specifically. It was more like the Matt Dixon article which I can send you, Politico, is more about how the governor seems to be picking the Senate.
Okay.
This being a big thing to look about.
I'd be interested in that.
But it's interesting. Under
How are you, David? Wonderful, thank you. Good to see you. Everything's great. How about you?
That's going good.
Hey, how's it going, David?
Good morning, Tim. Good to see you. Oh, thank good. It worked well for the intended purpose. Yeah. That's what we see, things unexpected. Yeah. Yeah.
Blue.
Yeah, absolutely. That's hey, yeah. Like there's a side TP. It says first qualified, first certified. Yeah. Yeah. It's good to see you, Tim.
Yeah, I got it.
Hey, how are you?
Thanks for
See you.
reminding me. Right there.
It's yeah, no, it was my pleasure.
Now,
Thank you.
I mean, we're traveling, but we're not staying in hotels. You know, like, I went to Hampton, stayed at my wife's home. I have a place in Canada.
I heard.
see like I'm also starting to hear that GCs are
Hello?
Good to see you.
So I'm having trouble with that.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it's fine.
I had to leave earlier, but yeah, I'm heading back right after this. But as of
I've gone to 2 already for whatever reason.
yeah, he was supposed to land.
Quiet.
Underwriting agency.
Good morning, Secretary.
You ready? All right, we're going to go ahead and, am I on?
I think you hold it
Close
down
on it,
here. Check, check. Yeah, you hold it down.
Hello?
You have to hold
Hello?
down when you're talking.
Mine's not.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't
Check.
realize that.
No, I don't.
This.
Can you hear me?
Here. Oh, no, now it's good.
Can
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yep.
Hello?
Okay, we'll go ahead and call our meeting to order. Sheila, could you please do the roll for us?
Ron Lieberman,
Here?
Ryan Benson,
Here.
Sandra Einhorn,
Here.
Mario Facella,
Here.
David Hall,
Here.
Dev Matwani,
Here.
and Dane Eagle. Thank you.
Okay.
The Wi-Fi is FSU event, and there's no password.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Okay, is there any public comment on anything that's on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward. Minutes, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 29th?
So moved.
Have a motion
Second?
And a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Seeing none, moving on. Approval of items on the consent agenda. Trey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As of this point, I have not gotten word from any board members to remove any items from the consent agenda, but I will give the board members the opportunity to do that now.
Does anybody have anything? Seeing none, okay. So I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Okay, moving on. Audit Committee update. Mario?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Audit Committee meeting convened on Thursday, June 16th, 2022. The first order of business was approving the minutes from the April 28th, 2022 meeting. The Audit Committee received updates on current OIG audit projects, and the Information Technology Security Manager provided an update on current IT security measures being employed. The Audit Committee received the 2021 audited financial statements. Ernst & Young presented the results of the 2021 financial statement audit to the committee. The audit had an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. There were no reportable findings for the federal compliance portion of the audit, which includes the schedule of federal awards. Additionally, there were no management letter comments. Once the board accepts these financial statements, staff will post them to the Florida Housing website. So at this time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that the board accept the 2021 audited financial
Okay,
statements.
do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Yeah, go ahead.
I, again, just publicly want to commend Angie and her team on a squeaky clean, super comprehensive audit.
Thank you, and thank you.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, go ahead and move on. Multifamily programs. Marissa, boy, you have short time today, only one item.
Yes, thank you. And I'll make it quick, hopefully. This item is our request to develop RFA 2022-109, home ARP financing for smaller permanent supportive housing developments for persons with special needs. As you all will recall, back in April of last year, HUD announced the home ARP allocations for participating jurisdictions and guidance for the use of funds that would be released in the fall of 2021. Florida Housing was awarded just under $72 million as a recipient for the state's non-entitlement allocation. And in October, the board approved our request to engage in the required consultation process and public participation process to develop a home ARP allocation plan for submission to HUD. We developed the plan and we proceeded with the consultation and public comment process. In January this year, you approved that home allocation plan, and we've worked with DEO to submit the allocation plan to HUD. And the allocation plan itself reflects our intent to use part of the home ARP funding to solicit applications to fund the development of new affordable housing units through RFAs. And thus far, we have utilized the home ARP funding for that purpose with the issuance of RFA 2022-210. And that's what I would call larger, the high utilizer RFA. We've talked through at a lot of board meetings up until this point. That RFA, we're intending to see somewhere between 60 to 90 units come out of those developments. And that submission, that RFA is live right now. So now we're in a place, we've also offered, for the purposes of development, some of the home ARP funds through the CHIRP program, which is also live right now. And we're now seeking sort of a third leg to that stool in terms of development for the home ARP dollars to issue this RFA. It will be leveraged with other resources. We still need to do some workshopping about that. We anticipate leveraging with probably NHTF funds and this for an RFA for smaller permanent supportive housing developments consisting of 30 units or less. And this would be similar to the recently issued 2022-102 RFA, for which you all approved the funding awards and scoring results last board meeting. We received 3 applications in response to that RFA, and 1 application was funding. So it's funded. So we think we have a unique opportunity to utilize the home ARP dollars to issue another RFA and have the opportunity for the developments that were not funded in the last 102 deal to come in and apply competitively and open it up broadly as well to other applicants to come and apply for funding for those small permanent supportive housing developments. There is some pending litigation in that RFA 2022-102 that, to my knowledge, as we sit here, is still pending. But if there is no litigation on that and that quiets down, we would anticipating put some type of preference in to acknowledge a funding for developments that submitted and were not awarded in that RFA 2022-102. If that's not the case, we still intend to go forward. Think it's a good opportunity for folks who have been looking at this type of funding specifically for those smaller permanent supportive housing developments. So we would want to do a workshop in July with the goal of issuing an RFA in August or September. So it's a ambitious goal, but we'd like to continue to move forward with that because it's important for us to get these home ARP dollars out as well. So what we're seeking is your authorization to begin that process, to workshop, and then ultimately issue an RFA for this purpose. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a
I
second.
have,
Discussion.
I just have a question, a couple questions. Marissa, so it sounds like there were the 2 that did not make it in the first round were smaller in nature?
All three were. It was a smaller
Okay.
development RFA, so yes.
So, but there was nothing about the original RFA that would have precluded them from getting dollars other than the amount of money available?
And their applications at the time. They were not eligible for funding in that RFA.
Okay. And then my last question is, what are the services associated? I think this is great, by the way, this program, so just put that out there. And I appreciate you all focusing on this demographic. But are there specific services that are required in these facilities?
Yes, I'm going to turn, Bill, would you mind jumping in there?
Yes, certainly. Yes, and as Marissa said, these developments are 30 units or less permanent supportive housing. So the applicants are nonprofit organizations that have the capacity also to be able to provide services coordination and other services around housing stability and access to community-based services,
Okay.
or the connections in the community with other service providers and lead agencies to do so.
Okay. Yeah, my only reason I bring that up is my concern is the smaller the project gets, the harder it is to provide those services and amortize over the same number of units. And I just want to make sure that those services are at the right level if they're being promised to the tenants.
And we vet that process through the application process, the experience in doing that, and all of those things we seek out in the application for the applicant to tell us how they're going to plan to do all of that in their experience in having done so.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? No. Seeing none, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, okay. You're approved. Thank you. Okay. Services. There you are. David. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item is in regards to the RFQ issued for homebuyer loan program servicing. At the March 4th, 2022 meeting, the board authorized staff to issue a competitive solicitation for these services, and the executive director established a review committee. The RFQ was issued, and we received 2 responses. The members of the review committee are listed in the item there, 3 finance staff and 2 program staff. Each review committee member reviewed the proposals, and at the May 4th meeting, provided their final scores for the responses. So the recommendation, based on these scores, is that the review committee recommends that the board authorize Florida Housing staff to enter into contract negotiations with the highest scoring respondent, Lakeview Loan Servicing, LLC. Should negotiations with Lakeview fail, the committee would also like to request authorization to then enter into contract negotiations with U.S. Bank.
Okay, can I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
I have 2 motions in 1 second. Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, okay, moving on. David?
All right, thank you. We also issued a request for qualifications related to compliance administration services for the single-family homebuyer loan program. Board authorized this again at the March 4th meeting, and the executive director established a review committee. The RFQ was issued on April 4th, and we received 2 responses to this RFQ as well. Members of the review committee are again listed in your item. And at the June 1st meeting, those committee members got together and provided their final scores. So based upon that, the review committee recommends that the board authorize Florida Housing to enter into contract negotiations with Housing and Development Services, Inc., doing business as eHousing Plus. Should those negotiations fail, staff recommends that the board authorize Florida Housing to enter into contract negotiations with Hilltop Securities, Inc.
Okay, can I have a motion, please?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none? Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to public service. Item C, Bill.
Yes, again, good morning. This item. This item is item C, and it's the tenant-based rental agreement renewals for existing housing stability for homeless school children initiatives at the September.
Your mic's off, Bill.
Testing.
Yep.
Better.
Bill in stereo.
Again, this is item C, tenant-based rental agreement, renewals for the existing housing stability for homeless school children initiatives. At the September 2020 meeting, the board authorized Florida Housing staff to fund the proposed housing stability for homeless school children initiatives in Alachua, Bay, and Charlotte counties. As you remember, they were 3 additional to our first 2 demonstration initiatives, which were in Santa Rosa and Hernando County. The Alachua County Housing Authority contract was executed in September of 2022. The Punta Gorda Housing Authority for Charlotte County contract was September 2022 was executed, and the Panama City Housing Authority was executed in October of 2022. And again, this agreement is between the Florida Housing Finance Corporation and the local public housing authority who has jurisdiction to administer rental assistance, not only Section 8, but also the home tenant-based rental assistance in those counties. So it's really the contract as we execute in contract with the PHAs to administer the home tenant-based rental assistance. The contract states that contingent upon satisfactory performance, the obligations under the contract is determined by Florida Housing, that they were met. These agreements may be renewed for an additional 2-year period. So currently, Florida Housing staff supports using the 2-year renewal option for those agreements for all 3 of the counties. And the recommendation today is staff recommends the board direct staff to proceed with the 2-year renewal option for all 3 agreements. And again, that would be for the Alachua County Housing Authority, Punta Gorda Housing Authority, and Panama City Housing Authority.
Bill, did you mean the dates will be executed, those dates? Or have, if it has been, it would be 2021?
They were, they will be executed in 2022, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you for
do I have
that.
a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
I have a
Any
quick,
discussion?
just a quick question. I mean, this states if they're satisfactorily performing their obligations, you make the recommendation, or you can make the recommendation to extend. I assume staff believes they are satisfactorily performing their obligations?
Yes.
Okay.
Staff have meetings with all the partners as well as the Public Housing Authority.
Okay.
And we've been extremely pleased with the performance of the Public Housing Authorities administering
Okay.
this program and being true partners
Great.
with the school district and the other partners in the community.
Great, so just a recommendation going forward, if, in the background, you state there's a contingent ability to extend, but you don't acknowledge that that contingency's been met, which is why I asked the question. So in the future, if we could just acknowledge that and just kind of speed
Will
things
do
up.
it. Thank you.
Anything?
Bill, so do you have an idea of how many students are being serviced by the programs?
I do not. I'm thinking it's, at this point, it's close to 100 households, and probably within the total number of students would be in the closer to the 200 range. We have had issues enticing or bringing new counties on board, or in our existing programs, we've had issues with adding new households unless other households have kind of met their 2 years and have successfully moved on. And the biggest issue is the available rental housing that is affordable and kind of meets the rent limits set by the HUD Home Program. So that's probably the biggest challenge as to serving more families. We have the resources to serve more families, and also bringing new county partnerships on board at this time.
So there's funding reserved for the additional counties if there's interest?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything as a board that we can do to make it more enticing for other counties to come on board?
I think it's always helpful from a knowing that, the board of directors of Florida Housing and the staff support this, and we're willing to put our housing resources to benefit these efforts. And again, you've heard me say this many times, that for these families and for these children, it's just not providing the rental assistance and getting them in the front door. You have to have some of the wraparound resources and the community commitment to help those folks achieve, housing stability, long-term housing stability, and greater self-sufficiency, and help them kind of not, after the rental assistance is finished, not to end up back in their homeless situation. I think right now, to answer your question, it's like, as with everything else, we're kind of just waiting to see what's happening, with the rental housing trends, and thinking about at least with this home resource, that we are now in most, and even some of the more rural counties and communities, either there's no rental units available, and if they are, they're not affordable to these households under this program.
In addition to our support, this board also controls a pretty large amount of money, which I'm wondering is, what are our handcuffs as a board that wouldn't allow us to make modifications to make this appealing to other counties?
Yeah, that's his question. So
Yeah.
I'll take that if you like. So my sense is that at this point, we've got the two biggest constraints, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, seem to be, when we're doing this program, we want to make sure that it's done correctly and that those services are enacted and available for these residents and these homeless school children. So we're having that issue because these are services in the community. Togetherness has to be in place for these programs to take off. And then the other boundary that we're running into is the availability of the actual units in the communities that we're looking to serve here, which are medium and small counties. That's not to say, because we're also having issues in large counties as well, but this is a home, the home program based in which we administer funds for these smaller counties and cities, and that's where we're kind of focusing our efforts at this point. And so those are I feel like are the two biggest obstacles that we're running up to at this point for expanding the program further.
I really have to commend my staff and also David's staff, Westcott staff again, because there is a lot of time spent with not only our existing initiative communities, with the school districts, with the public housing agencies, with case management agencies, with the county health and human services, again, as Trey said, to be able to form these partnerships and get interest. We're also working with the Florida Department of Education, on looking for other resources under the Federal Homeless Education Program to be able to provide more case management services, not just to the child when they're in school, but also to the family as a whole. So we're learning a lot. It's just we are running into some of the same challenges that I think is hitting the entire affordable housing. But I definitely appreciate the interest and kind of thoughts outside of the current parameters.
Well, are the hurdles in finding the units because of those other services that need to be surrounding these families? Because I just wonder, we have RFAs, that are designated for certain demographics. I mean, can we develop an RFA that, gives incentive to develop for this demographic? Just
And
a thought.
Yeah, and it's more at this point about available, what we'd call independent rental housing, and less about the permanent supportive housing, because a lot of times these families, there will be situations where they have special needs or there's mental illness with one of the family members or the parents. A lot of times with these homeless families, a lot of it is due to economic impact. And not being able to, in some of these rural areas, not having as much rental housing availability, but also, again, being able to find that independent rental
Yeah.
unit.
I think that that's an important distinction, that it's not so much that the RFP is fantastic, it's just the market realities of setting a provider up for failure, right? You don't want to, no provider wants to sign up knowing that either they're going to fall by the wayside in being able to provide housing on the front end, but then also subsequently, you don't want to house someone for 2 years and then they're not able to make it afterwards. So I know that when I speak to, local communities about this, because obviously I think that this is a fantastic program, that's what it really comes down to, is so much uncertainty around the lack of affordable housing, which we all know, or we wouldn't be here. And that correlating to, you know, how do we even take these dollars when we know in good faith we're not going to be able to house people immediately, and we don't even know if those that we can house immediately will be able to maintain stability after the 2 years is up.
Yep, good point.
And just to add to that, I mean, it's frustrating, there's a lack of units. And even if we paid a premium for these, you know, for these families to come off, all we've done is displaced another person and made an affordable unit not attainable to that family. There's just not enough units.
Yep.
Is there a problem with the professional performance standards that makes other counties not want to participate? And then also, if there's no available units in that particular county, are they able to use it in another county if they do like a referral to a case management in that county that may have a unit that's close by?
It depends, and David may have a better sense of this. The rental assistance is tenant-based, so it's not tied to a particular unit. So that resource could traditionally go to another county. The issue with this, with it being, you know, initiative or program specific to the Housing Stability Program, that takes that rental assistance outside of the jurisdiction of the public housing agency who's administering the rental assistance for that program. From everything that we hear, because administering this home tenant-based rental assistance is very similar to administering Section 8 housing choice vouchers and rental assistance, there's not really an issue with the PHAs as to administering it. In fact, we find that they really enjoy it, and once they learn and see what this program is doing for the families, they are probably the biggest advocate of the local partners. It turns out to be the PHAs, but again, it comes to they don't have the units within kind of their system and their landlord system under Section 8, and they're even trying to recruit other landlords, and we market it to other landlords as a community effort, so we have more private landlords interested in helping the children and helping these families, but and I'm generally speaking, but it's just difficult to find the units right now.
Okay. All right, I do have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none? Okay. Angie, item D.
All right, is this working yet? Yes, it's working now. Okay. Now that I have a working mic, I also thank you, Sandra, for those kudos. And I want to recognize the finance leadership team, Kirsten Helms, Kenny Derrickson, and Denise Bonzingo, because it's really all on them and the entire finance staff getting us those great audit results. So, OnBase. Florida Housing uses OnBase as its primary document management system, and OnBase is proprietary software owned by Highland Software. Therefore, Highland is the only provider of this system. In January 2020, the board approved an upgrade to the enterprise license to increase available functionality and to better integrate OnBase with our primary multifamily software, ProLink. The increased functionality has been a good thing. Since we've moved to OnBase enterprise licensing, Florida Housing has utilized unavailable modules and a couple more that we're working on implementing now. These modules directly enhance and improve business unit processes and document management. Continuing the enterprise licensing is the most economical way to keep this capability and flexibility moving forward. So staff recommends that the board authorize staff to enter into negotiations for a one-year single source contract with Highland Software for continued access to the enterprise license.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, okay. We'll go ahead and move on. Ann,
All right,
oh, there she is.
good morning.
Good morning, Ann. It's been 2 years since the last study?
It's been 3 years,
3 years, wow.
but this is number 8 for us. So I tried to think of some new things to say,
Okay.
for those of you who heard this before.
All right, well, thank you for being here.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to all of you for hosting us today. I'm Ann Ray. I'm with the Schimberg Center for Housing Studies. We're at University of Florida. And we, under contract with Florida Housing, we produce the Florida Housing Data Clearinghouse. And we also produce the Triennial Rental Market Study. So this, as I said, is the 8th one of these that we've done. We started in 2001. And the study, its narrow purpose is to provide the demographic and geographic information about rental housing needs that are used to allocate multifamily resources, especially sale dollars. But the broader purpose is we try and make this into a document that can inform rental housing policy in general. So we try each time to find some new things to say. What I'm going to do today is really try and emphasize those new things. There's a lot of numbers in here. I'm not going to bore you by reading them all off, but I do want, as those numbers show us trends, particularly as we compare things to the last rental market studies that we did in 2016 and 2019, I want to call those out. So the organization of the study is we have a statewide trend section where, again, we try and get at what's going on in rental housing in Florida right now. We have the core needs assessment that looks at the needs of low-income renter households by county size, and between families and elders. And we have a series of demographic reports that are used to allocate different dollars to special populations. And then we take a look at the assisted and public housing supply in the state. And I'll tell you, in thinking about this report and the information that we've gathered, I think what you'll see here to an unusual degree is how much it emphasizes the importance of Florida Housing's own programs and Florida Housing's role in both building the affordable housing supply and preserving the assisted housing supply. It's always important, but in this market where market rate rental housing is becoming so expensive, is really so out of reach, what we really see is this growing gap between what the market rate is charging, what tenants are able to afford, and then in contrast, what Florida Housing's own portfolio and the assisted housing supply in general is. We've always seen it. I've never seen it like this before. So that's, I think, something to keep in mind, Florida Housing's role, again, both in production and preservation. So getting into statewide trends, this is the first, oh dear, do you have to turn around to see it? I'll try and describe what we're seeing here. Okay, great. This is the first time since the housing boom and bust years that we've seen the number of renters holding steady as we look at the rental market study and the number of owners rising. And I should back up for a second. A lot of what you're going to see is based on the 2019 American Community Survey, which is data that is collected by the U.S. Census Bureau every year. For our rental housing needs assessments, we do project that data out to 2022. But this is based on 2019, which is the most recent year that we have accurate data. 2020 data collection, for obvious reasons by the Census Bureau, was really difficult to do. And so they put out some sort of provisional numbers that, based on what we've heard from the Census Bureau, they were both late in coming out, which made it difficult to use for this. And what we've heard from the Census Bureau probably aren't the most accurate and useful set of numbers to use. So we wanted to work with something reliable. We're going back to 2019. When the 2021 data comes out, which we expect to be a sort of more normal year, that'll be toward the end of this year, then we're going to put some of these numbers out again so you have that to work with. So as I said, we had, in the time I've been doing the rental market study, we've really been seeing the numbers of renters in the state increasing up until about 2015 or 2016. And that's when that levels off. And we saw the number of homeowners either dipping or remaining steady. And about that same time, you see the number of homeowners starting to rise. So that actually is a new trend, and that definitely affects what we see, that the need numbers that we're going to show you are relative for low-income renter households are relatively flat compared to the last rental study. It's still a lot, but it's not the kind of increases we had always seen in the past. And that's pretty much because the number of renters is finally holding steady in the state after many, many years of increases. A point we've made before and need to make again is that renters at all income levels participate in the workforce. And most of the renters who are not participating in the workforce are either households where all of the adults are elderly, are disabled, or both. And so those blue lines that you see are at different income levels among renters, the number of households where the percentage of households where at least one adult is working. And for anything over 30% of AMI, it's almost all of them. Even at 30% of AMI, most households are either working or they're elderly or disabled. So, we really make the point that in a lot of ways, all rental housing is workforce housing. When we look at the jobs that renters are working in, a lot of them are in hospitality, service jobs, healthcare, food service, and that's true both for renters under 60% AMI and for all renters in the state. And in fact, the ones that are more serving people over 60% of AMI are often people supervising the people who are the renters who are working in these lower paying jobs. So there's a lot of overlap between what Florida Housing's main market are doing for a living and what renters in the state are doing in general. And that's consistent with what we've seen in the past. This is another trend that's consistent with what we've seen in the past, that Florida as a state is adding rental units, particularly through that 2015-2016 year, but it's adding units that cost more than $1,000 a month. So corrected for inflation, the entire increase in Florida's rental stock between 2010 and 2019 were units renting for $1,000 or more. So, if you look at the wages on the previous slide, if you look at the wages for the jobs, those are very difficult to afford $1,000 a month. But that's what we're adding. And again, if you think about it, so here's an example where Florida Housing's role is critical. That's to the extent that the $1,000 a month units are even holding steady, you all have a big role to play in that. And this is something we've added to the rental market study, is beginning to take a look at how much those rents in rent-restricted units that you all have in your portfolio versus the overall rental stock, how much those rents have really diverged over the years. So when Florida Housing first started funding and the federal government first started funding tax credit developments, 60% AMI rents were kind of like middle market rents, certainly not luxury units, not the lowest either. And so we took the Orlando area, because we had to do it at a metro level, and Orlando very much mirrors what the state looks like as a whole. If you look back in the 90s, even through 2000s, the median rent for all units in the state looked a lot like tax credit rents. And then around 2010, as housing starts to get more expensive, those start to diverge a lot. To the extent that now a 60% AMI rent is over $300 a month less than the median gross rent for all units in the state. And that's not just market rate luxury units, that's all units, your portfolio, public housing, everything. That's about $1,300 a month, median gross rent for the entire rental stock, but 60% AMI rents in Orlando, for example, are under $1,000. And if you look at the more, for a two-bedroom, and if you look at the more deeply subsidized units or deeply affordable, 50% AMI, 30% AMI rent limits, they're that much lower than that median rent for all the units. And of course, if you're looking for something that's comparable to what you're building, larger, multifamily, newer developments, right now in Florida, Apartment List is pegging the statewide median rent at about $1,800 a month. So you're providing a tremendous level of affordability, where I'd say earlier, 90s, 2000s, it was really a sort of quality difference and a way to add to the stock. Now it's providing a depth of affordability that you really just can't get in the private market. Because we were using 2019 data, we did try and supplement that in the study with information that was more contemporary. So that, Apartment List rents, for instance, that I mentioned. We have been at the Schimberg Center since the beginning of the pandemic tracking eviction filings. We have them by county, by month. We saw a big dip in eviction filings with the imposition of a statewide moratorium on evictions. Once that moratorium was replaced with the CDC moratorium, which allowed the filing of evictions, around September 2020, you see those filings come way back up. They dipped down again with the provision of emergency rental assistance. And Florida, when we were working on this a couple months ago, had distributed nearly $1.5 billion in rental assistance, about $1 billion of that from the state and about $500 million from cities and counties. And so with those programs starting to shut down, we're starting to see evictions reach historic levels again. I am very concerned about what happens next without that federal rental assistance available. And again, it points up how critical it is to both build and preserve affordable stock so people aren't getting behind. You know, as you see, when we came into this in 2019, there were already thousands of evictions being filed each month in Florida. So this isn't a pandemic problem, and it's not going to end anytime soon. So that I think is a real concern. And again, points up the importance of this long-term trend toward affordable supply. So getting into the core needs assessment, this is really the meat of what we do each time we do a rental assistance, a rental market study. The main number we look at is cost burden low-income renters. We define low income as being below 60% of area median income, because that's what many of your programs serve. We define a cost burden household as paying more than 40% of their income for rent, a little different than the usual 30% standard, because we want to provide some cushion for the fact that a lot of people who live in Florida Housing's units have incomes below 60% of area median income. So they might be paying a little more than 30%, but not the 75% or 50% of income they might pay in the private market. And we exclude from that number student-headed non-family households to really get at the needs, particularly in Leon and Alachua counties, where otherwise students would skew the numbers. So Florida has about 768,000 low-income cost burden renters. That's very similar to the number we found in the last rental market study. It's actually slightly lower. And again, I think that's because the number of renters has really leveled off. And 60% AMI households or below are much more likely to be cost burden than higher income households, particularly if you get above 80% of AMI. These patterns are very similar to what we've seen throughout the rental market studies. The majority of cost burden households are in the 7 largest counties, with population over about 825,000. A little over a third are in the medium-sized counties, and around 3% are in the smallest counties in the state, those with less than 100,000 people. These patterns have remained consistent over time. This one's changed a little bit, not that much, but it's become even more so, I guess. The majority of cost burden households are 1 or 2 people. We really have a need for smaller, affordable units. And that 68% is actually a little higher than it's been in the past, because the population is getting older, and older households tend to be smaller. So the other thing we see, in addition to this increase in the number of smaller households, is a steady, and in this case, actually a bit of a jump of an increase in the number of cost burden households that are headed by somebody age 55 or older, and in particular, those who are headed by somebody age 75 or older. That 39%, that's just a number that has gone up every time we've done this rental market study. And it varies regionally. In particular, there's these areas of the state, in the southern part of the state, where it's close to half of the cost burden renters are age 55 or older, and therefore, will qualify for age-restricted housing. So, these are kind of like the same trends, but more so than what we've seen in the past. Next, we do an analysis that looks at affordable and available units. It compares the number of renter households in a particular income band with the units that are both affordable to them, where they would be able to meet a rent limit of a 30% AMI unit, a 60% AMI unit, and that's why we use this 30% of income standard. And it's also available to them. It's not already occupied by a higher income household. So this works the exact same way that, say, the tax credit program or sale works, where you have both an income and a rent limit. And it's a way for us to see, what supply is actually available to people who are looking for housing, and how are people sorting within units. Are higher income households taking up a lot of affordable units? And in this, we're seeing patterns that are very similar to what we've seen in the past, where up to about 60% of AMI statewide, we don't have enough affordable units, period. So those bars, both the gray and the blue part, represent the number of affordable units. And then that diamond above is the number of renters. So up to 60% of AMI, we just flat out, if you subtract the number of affordable units from the number of renters who need them, we've got a gap. Once you get above 60% AMI, at 80%, we have enough units. The number of renters is smaller than the number of total units, but almost 500,000 of those units are occupied by households above 80% of AMI. So effectively, they're unavailable to the lower income households. So, and that's only at about 120% AMI where you finally reach some kind of parity. So again, that points out the importance of Florida housing stock, because not only are you providing affordable units, you're also providing income caps. So there are not higher income households. And if you think everybody's out there trying to find a rental unit right now, higher income households are not competing for that small supply of affordable units. So if you look at, say, that 0 to 60% AMI supply of units, a big part of that is your own portfolio. And then we just look, I'll just go through this quickly, we just look regionally, because that can vary quite a bit. Statewide, there's no place where, in most places, any of these places that are colored in dark, there's well under 100 affordable unit and available units per 100 renters. As you go up the income scale, so the places that are crosshatched have an adequate supply. That starts to change. And by the time you hit 80% AMI, it's really just a few very expensive counties that continue to have a shortage of affordable and available supply. Then we also provide information about demographic groups, as I mentioned. So I'll just go through these very quickly and say anything we've seen that have been changing. We look at homeless individuals and families. We use both the point-in-time counts that homeless coalitions do and student data from the Florida Department of Education to try and get at some of the families with children who are, I heard you talking about the attendant-based rental assistance, who are doubled up with others, who are living in hotels and motels, who wouldn't necessarily get picked up by the point-in-time count. We did actually in this see a decline from the 2019 rental market study, but that's because the 2019 study picked up people who are affected by hurricanes. So people who moved in the state because of Irma, especially people moving from Puerto Rico because of Hurricane Maria, some moving from Texas because of Harvey. So we're kind of back to, I would say, the historic status quo in our counts of homeless populations. We also look at populations defined as having special needs, which is either adults receiving disability-related benefits and having some kind of disabling condition, youth aging out of foster care, and survivors of domestic violence. And these numbers are very similar to what we've seen in the past. About 1 in 7 of our entire need is made up of these special needs households that fit that definition. So this is useful for the sale allocation. We look at farm workers and fishing workers as another set of populations that have set-asides within Florida Housing's programs. I would say that the one notable thing there is we continue to see a shift toward more H-2A visa guest workers, and so a shift away from family farm workers and more toward individuals who also can share Florida Housing's farm worker units, so there's still a need for those kind of units. And then finally, we take a look at the affordable housing supply. And this is where I really want to, again, emphasize the importance. You see that most of the assisted housing, affordable rental units that are income and rent restricted in the state are part of your portfolio. Almost 226,000 units, over 1,900 developments. That way is much larger than the public housing stock in the state, and it's also larger, quite a bit larger than what HUD through its multifamily programs and USDA has been able to provide. So it places you right at the center. If you look at this map, and if you would flip back to the map of cost burden households, the matchup between where the affordable supply is and where the demand is pretty good, where you see this greater number of units in South Florida. This is something that you may have seen before in previous rental market studies. Florida Housing, and certainly the federally subsidized properties, serve a much lower income profile than Florida's renters as a whole. The average renter income has been going up in the state quite a bit as higher income households are moving to the state, as more people are, for a time, were shifting from owning to renting. Florida housing properties, the average income is about $26,000. All Florida renters is about $58,000. So you're serving significantly lower income households and at substantially lower rents, as we saw before. So the average rent is about $820 as opposed to that $1,300 that all Florida renters are paying. And again, if you look at the market rate stock that's comparable and available now, in most places that's going to be a lot more than $1,300. So there's quite a deep level of affordability that's provided by your programs. And finally, because of that, and because we have such a gap, we really emphasize the importance of preservation. When we did the rental market study in 2016, and we were looking ahead, where did we see expiring subsidies in both the Florida housing stock and the federally subsidized stock? We saw this big jump in 2020, and we looked at why. And that's because, 30-year tax credit properties that were built in the 1990s, they were going to start having expiring subsidies. There's also a lot of federal developments that had 40 or 50-year mortgages, which in the 70s and 80s was a long time, and those as well are starting to expire. So we kind of flagged this trend in 2016, flagged it in 2019, now we're in it. And so looking over the past 3 years, we've had almost 4,000 units exit the assisted housing inventory. That includes Florida housing developments, it includes a lot of HUD developments, and it includes USDA rural developments in small towns and rural areas. By 2030, we see another almost 25,000 units at risk, and the majority of those are those early 30-year tax credit properties. Because there was so much tax credit development in the Orlando area in the early 90s, almost half of them are in the four-county Orlando area. And so certain parts of the state are going to be very heavily affected by that loss of affordable units, that somehow need to be replaced either through preservation, kept through preservation or replaced through production, because, we know how Orlando is struggling right now, and the other counties you see here too that are heavily affected. It's going to kind of happen in two pieces. First, you have the 9% tax credit units that were funded in the early 90s, and then around 95, Florida Housing started imposing 50-year restrictions on the 9% credits, and so that risk really fades out, and you don't see it happening again for another couple decades. But many of the 4% credits and sale and bond units still had those 30-year restrictions. And so you'll see some loss of units. These bars show the numbers of units that are expiring each year, unless there's some kind of refinancing with preservation financing. So we are going to see this sort of steady drip, 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 and quite geographically concentrated over the next 10 years. We also see risk from aging properties. A lot of these are the same, of course, something that has a 30 or 40 or 50-year mortgage expiring. Also, it's a 30 or 40 or 50-year project, which needs recapitalization. And in particular, the 30-year properties are heavily dominated by HUD, multifamily and public housing. A lot of those are elderly properties and very low incomes because they're deeply subsidized. So without some kind of concerted preservation risk, we're going to lose some deep federal subsidy. It's really critical for these older households. I just wanted to end by pointing out that this situation would be more difficult had Florida Housing not been investing in preservation all along. And so the corporation has been focusing for years now on preserving housing with that deep rental assistance from HUD. So we looked at the properties, over 33,000 units where Florida Housing has invested, that were federally subsidized to start with, either public housing or HUD or rural development subsidized, where Florida Housing invested tax credits, sale, and bonds. It's over 33,000 units. Their average rent is $368 a month because tenants can pay 30% of their income for their housing. Tenant income, something like $15,000 a year. It's again, the preserved units have all of your units have that depth of affordability, but the preserved units, because of those federal subsidies, really are irreplaceable. And I particularly want to commend you on the participation of Florida Housing in the public housing RAD program, and how much that's been able to not only preserve aging developments, but also replace them with contemporary housing for these properties that really needed, they needed to go. They weren't serving people well. So I'd be happy to, I know I've thrown a lot of numbers at you when I said I wasn't going to, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or focus on any of those areas.
Okay, thank you, Ann. David, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. I was not proud to see my county, Treasure Coast, Palm Beach on the list, but with the rental assistant, and I know with COVID, a lot of rental assistants had to deal with people out of work. Do you see those numbers dealing with work-related or job issue, or it has to do with the cost of rentals?
I think it's the cost. I mean, when you look at the COVID era numbers, so the census has this household pulse survey now where they ask people, how many people are behind in their rent. I think it's something like 20%. But that makes me think, well, how many were behind before COVID hit? We put in the report actually that our employment numbers came back up almost immediately after the summer of 2020. The leisure and hospitality was hit really hard for a short time, but unemployment is low. So I think you're unfortunately dealing with the structural problems you came in with. I also feel like the emergency rental assistance program gave us an idea of something that could be done. And there's no particular reason that needs to end with this one public health crisis. I mean, that, with all its difficulties, and it took a while to ramp up, and it took all this administrative capacity to build, we have that structure now. So I would really love to see that structure continue to be used. So, to provide that bridge when people need it.
And then you talked about the evictions, and the numbers went down and going back up. Do you see a reason? Because in my experience, I've seen that there has been a lot of evictions because there's nowhere else to go. And so, and inversely, it helps those individuals with their credit scores, so they don't have eviction on their credit. Do you see a reason, or did you find out a reason why those numbers are fluctuating and the purpose of them?
So there were kind of two phases that, I think had we done nothing, we would have seen the tsunami of evictions that people were predicting. Because, nobody was better off than they were before, and evictions were already, there were probably about 10 to 12,000 evictions filed per month in the state of Florida. There were two things, really. The first, that big dip came when, for a while, the eviction courts were just closed. You couldn't file an eviction. The filing started to come back up. We don't know how many of those were completed, but we're definitely seeing, we participate in eviction prevention task forces in Miami-Dade and in the Orlando area. They're starting to see the numbers, the judges are saying, are starting to see the numbers come back up to that historic level. So I think it's just a reflection of the lack of affordability. We also looked at foreclosure numbers, and we have those on our website as well. Those had that same, they were lower to begin with. They had that same dip, but I was very concerned to see in the first quarter of 22 a big sudden increase, also starting to come back to historic levels. Not, when I say historic, not of the worst times, but of sort of normal times compared to 2019. So I think, some different kinds of assistance and forbearance are starting to run out, and they're still needed.
Deb, you got a question?
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Yep. Ryan?
Thank you very much for putting this together. One of the challenges that I'm seeing is 2019, even though calendar-wise was 3 years ago, from a practical standpoint, may as well have been a decade. So the information is really, the information we're working from is more than challenging to develop conclusions from. I feel like we're getting kicked three ways. The first, to me, is the loss of units that are falling off. That's very frustrating, and I think that is going to be looked at with the very scary word of perpetuity when we do these, and those aren't my words, that's the incoming Senate President's word. And by the way, thank you to the senior leadership of Florida Housing for coming down to Southwest Florida to visit with myself and Senator Pasadomo last week. It was incredible, great discussion on where we're going. The number two issue that I'm seeing is the deficit that we currently have in units of I'm going to round to 800,000 from your 768 at a total development cost of $250,000 a unit. We have a $200 billion problem at the moment. That's to get to par. And the point I'm making, the short-term subsidies are great, but we have a supply issue with a demand problem. $200 billion at the way we address things at 20% as a second position is a $40 billion question for Florida housing. If we decide we want to address this in the next 20 years, we're talking about the legislature budgeting $2 billion a year. That gets us to zero if we're able to freeze 2019. And the third kick is using assumptions that are probably not worth much, but if we are having a supply increase of 30,000 units a year at $250,000 a unit, we have a $7.5 billion problem a year. Addressing it with second positions, we have a $1.5 billion deficit every year. Currently, the legislature gives us $150 million to address a $1.5 billion problem. So every step forward, we take 9 steps back. That is my really rough and dirty math. In order to get out of this, we need the legislature to give us $3.5 billion a year, and there's a chance that we can somehow have supply meet demand in 2 decades from now. Thank you.
Now we're all,
Right.
Sandra.
I don't want to go after him, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So I was just
Ryan-
curious, excuse me, you know, along those lines, in terms of, do you look at the in-migration occurring in Florida now, which I believe is nearly doubled since pre-pandemic, in terms of folks coming in and the demographic? I don't know if there's data like that available, the demographic of those who are, you know, moving to Florida, because that compiles a problem that that was just discussed, right? So I'm just wondering if you have that kind of data and if you look at projections in that way.
Thanks, that's a great question. We haven't here, and we definitely use sort of past patterns to make our projections forward, and that's the data we have. And as I said, the 2020 data is just not usable. That's one of the reasons why we want to take the 2021 census data when it's available, or American Community Survey from the census that's available, and update this, because I agree, I think we're going to see some, I don't think the immigration we're having is going to overwhelm the sort of problem that we already had, but sure, it can definitely contribute to it. And in particular, of course, where you'll see that is the changes in rents themselves, right? You're going to see that increased demand placing pressure on the supply, and all the people who would be purchasing homes right now if they weren't so expensive. So I think updating that information with the 2021 data will be critical. Without having that information collected and published yet, I'd be hesitant to say to make projections about what's going on.
And, in addition, with interest rates rising, you're going to have less movement from renters to owners. So the demand for units across the board are going to continue to rise.
Let me just add to what Ann is saying concerning the need for, updated and real-time data, as soon as it is available. We've been talking the last several months concerning making sure, and we've done this in the past between other rental market study time periods, is doing specific supplements based on exactly what we're talking about when that data becomes available. So we won't be waiting until 2025, to give you updated information. We'll be doing that as that happens.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. We expect that information to become available late this year, if everything goes according to schedule.
On that, I guess the concern with that, because I think that data is going to be shocking in a not great way. If it comes to light later this year or the end of this year, that's something that we'd be looking at Q1 of next year, all session policy for our session has been developed in Q4 and where things are going. So that's another 2 years away that we're looking at trying to resolve something. I don't think we expect the data we're going to see next year to be an improvement in any way. I'd be shocked to find someone that thinks that's the case, so I don't see a reason not to start addressing it in stronger form now, presuming it's bad.
Yep. Sandra?
Most of my comments were obviously addressed by fellow board members, but if I could just ask you to go back real quick to 2 slides. One is the slide that shows supply and demand for 60% of AMI and below.
You want the map or the graph?
That one right there. So just in case my friend Ralph Stone is tuning in right now, this is sort of, nope, the other one. The one that had the map, that one. This is what in South Florida and certainly in Broward County we've been talking about for quite some time now. I don't know if any of my other South Florida friends saw that Broward sort of stuck out like a sore thumb on this one. And then the next one that I think was 80% and below that also did not paint South Florida in a very nice light.
Back to.
And then I think the 0 to 120 at 20%. But I saw a lot of these gaps in supply and demand were concentrated certainly to South Florida, Collier, and some of the other more urban areas. That's obviously a concern for everyone. These are the economic powerhouses of our state. And so to see the lack of supply and demand, as a board, I hope that we could just continue to think ambitiously the way that Board Member Benson has talked about in the billions, but just really thinking consciously about how we can do a better job of not only supporting subsidies, but also supporting additional density. NIMBYism is broad, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute, but to me, it was really alarming, that 0 to 60% to see Broward as the only county in the black. I know that we talk about it locally as well, but to see that on a statewide map and to see Broward sticking out like that was definitely alarming.
And that tracks with the concentration of cost burden households that we see in the larger counties.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ann, for your presentation and your information. We'll be sharing this with the public and with the board members, and appreciate your help. I just have a couple of questions. Just curious, in the past rental market needs studies, did you consider cost burdens at 40% or was it at 30%? And I guess what I'm asking is that a change to 40% or is
No,
that?
we always do 40%.
Okay.
And so, again, the idea is that when we look at and this is actually in the report, when you look at Florida Housing's units, you may have 60% AMI units. They're housing a lot of 30 to 50% AMI folks. So they're going to be slightly cost burdened, but not compared to what they'd be paying on the market at all.
Okay. Okay. So you are comparing 40%, and have been, and so that's why, and then you're able to confidently say that those numbers are staying roughly the same. They've gone up.
Yeah,
Right.
they're very similar to what we found in the last rental market study.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. If I read that correctly, and I like to look for some good news, it seemed to see that homeless populations were down.
Yeah, so for 2 reasons. And one is a longstanding trend we've seen where the point-in-time counts are coming down because of these successful strategies that are moving folks from homeless shelters and transitional housing, where they're counted as homeless, to permanent supportive housing and affordable housing, where they're no longer homeless. Certainly the push to get homeless veterans in particular housed really had led to reductions before. For families, we do see a decline, but it's a decline from this high from the 2019 one because we're still dealing with the aftermath of hurricanes then.
Yeah.
That's become more stable. So let's say a family moved here from Puerto Rico, signed up with, was identified as homeless by the school system, now has gotten housed, has gotten stable, and is no longer counted as homeless.
So, Trey, if you don't mind, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. I think that the PIC count data, obviously, the PIC count data is based on HUD's definition of homelessness. I know in the counties that I have contacts, while street homelessness might be stable or gone down a little bit, the number of families that are doubling up, the number of families that are living in hotels, the number of families that are couch surfing is up significantly. In Broward, I serve on the local Homeless Continuum of Care Board. The number of homeless school children was, I think, like a couple dozen. But according to Broward County Public Schools, the number of homeless school children is in the thousands. So there's always that discrepancy between HUD's definition of homelessness. And I think that's the same thing that, you know, in the context that I have, what I've heard as it relates to evictions, you know, going back again, if you don't want an eviction on your record, then if you know that eviction is coming before you get evicted, you're moving out, you're doubling up with someone else because you don't want that eviction on your record. So I think sometimes the data that we see doesn't show the complete picture of what people are experiencing. I mean, I get calls every day about, you know, what families are experiencing, as I would assume every board member and most of you out there are experiencing as well. So I think sometimes when we see that data, we need to recognize that the data is somewhat limited based on the parameters that are provided to collect that data.
If I can add very briefly, the good news I saw in the presentation, or I say this positively surprising part, was that it's two-unit households or two-person households, which means that the development cost could go down at smaller units. I was happy to see how high that was and that trend is increasing, because it means from a density standpoint, we can put mechanisms in place, get more units per acre, and reduce those total development costs. If we can get them down from 250,000 to 200,000, we only have a $160 billion problem.
And then, Ann, Chairman, if I can.
Yes, go ahead.
So I might get with you. I'm spending some time in the Orlando area next week, and you seem to say in your report here that Orlando may be kind of ground zero for expiring affordability units. And, you know, it's interesting, but when I was in college at UCF, my best friend lived in what turned out to be one of our units in Florida Housing. I know the area pretty well. I know that there's a number of units that were built in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and now I guess the clock is ticking on those. But I might get with you in regards to that, but it seems to be that Orlando is got an issue with time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just so you know, I built a unit in Orlando, 212 units, in 1992, or my family did. That, we put 30-year time, so that's expiring
Sure.
this year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So,
And we appreciate you leaving it with the rent limits on it in perpetuity.
well, at the time, you know, it was only 15-year requirement. We did 30, so.
And may I, Mr. Chair, add one more thing to what we were talking about as to the need for supply, and rental assistance and rental subsidies are extremely important. Restricted rents, limited income or income set-asides, but exactly like we were talking about the homeless school children and their families, like we have the rental assistance to help get them in and be able to help pay for their rent. The same thing talking about homeless veterans, you know, and veterans with disabilities who are homeless. There's enough rental assistance, and I'm generalizing here, but there's enough rental assistance for homeless veterans and veterans with disabilities through the VASH program to serve and meet the needs. But again, the issue is that I'm hearing from the federal VASH program and public housing authorities, again, the issue is there's just not the units available to be able to use that rental assistance voucher or take that voucher to it. And again, it may not be the same in all areas, but in general, that's the trend in Florida as well as around the country.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move on. Any further questions, Ann will make herself available.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Okay, Hometown Heroes update. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Hometown Heroes Housing Program is a brand-new program created by the legislature in the latest legislative session, designed to make home ownership more affordable for eligible frontline community workers, such as law enforcement officers, firefighters, educators, healthcare professionals, as well as active duty military and veterans. There was $100 million appropriated for this program, and it's being used as down payment and closing cost assistance of up to 5% of the first mortgage loan amount, and with a maximum of $25,000. So we were very fortunate to have on May 23rd a press conference in Cape Coral, where Governor DeSantis announced the launch of the program. Secretary Eagle and Trey were also there and made remarks at this press conference. And I also want to recognize and thank Board Member Ryan Benson for being a part of that event as well. The publicity we got was wonderful, and it really has helped launch the program. We began accepting reservations for this program on June the 1st to correspond with National Home Ownership Month. And so since then, we have already have 226 home buyers who have reservations for these funds. $3.3 million in Hometown Heroes down payment assistance loans, which has leveraged over $65 million in first mortgage loans through this program. So we're really excited about that. How's the program work? How's the loan, look? What does it look like? It provides down payment and closing cost assistance to first-time income-qualified home buyers, so they can purchase a primary residence in the community in which they work and serve. These loans also offer a lower first mortgage interest rate, as well as special benefits, reduced closing costs for these borrowers as well. So the eligible first mortgage loans are the same as they are in our other homeownership loan program down payment assistance product loans. So, fully underwritten FHA, VA, USDA, Rural Development, Fannie Mae, or Freddie Mac loans. Again, the Hometown Heroes loan is 5% of the first mortgage loan amount with a maximum of $25,000. And so far, the average for the 226 people who have reserved has been close to $15,000, which exceeds our maximum $10,000 in our regular loan programs. The loan is a loan. It's 0% non-amortizing, a 30-year deferred second mortgage, and the mortgage becomes due and payable upon sale of the property, refinancing of the first mortgage, transfer of deed, or if the homeowner no longer occupies the property as his or her primary residence. So the loan is not forgivable. It's with the repayments. We hope to make this a revolving program to be used in years to come. So as part of the rollout, we conducted numerous trainings for both our realtor and lender partners. And so far, in the 14 realtor trainings that we've conducted, over 2,800 realtors have attended to learn more about the program and how to use it. Likewise, we've conducted 9 live webinars for our lender partners, participating lenders, and have had attendance of over 3,500 in those 9 sessions. So we're continuing to do these trainings. We've recorded the realtor training and are making that available by link to realtors who are interested, and we'll do additional lender trainings as needed as well. Also want to give a shout out to our great external affairs team, including Stephanie Sutton and Caroline Benson, who've helped us get the word out in numerous other ways. They've developed marketing toolkits for our participating lenders and other partners. And they've designed the Hometown Heroes web landing page, which has already been viewed more than 350,000 times. So I think the interest at the press conference and others has driven folks to where we want them to go to learn about the program. They've also done outreach to dozens of statewide partner organizations with eligible members. And they distributed a brilliant op-ed piece written by our chairman, Ron Lieberman, which is run in a half dozen newspapers already, including the Palm Beach Post and the Tampa Bay Times.
I'm glad you used the word brilliant.
Yes. So, Mr. Chairman, we're very happy with the progress so far and looking forward to helping, many more eligible households through this Hometown Heroes program. And
How many lenders do you have that have,
so currently we have 246 different participating lending institutions, and many of those have numerous loan officers that are
That's
part of
great.
the program.
okay, any questions?
I just have a couple comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, David, and thank you to the team for a wonderful rollout. Thank you, Secretary Eagle and Board Member Benson, for attending with us and the governor to roll the program out and get the kind of exposure that, we're getting. I'd encourage folks to look to the website as far as information on the program. And then, we hear a lot of, we hear some frustration from some people who maybe their occupation isn't included. Again, I think the legislature and the governor were trying to target, healthcare workers, teachers, law enforcement officers, and other essential community workers. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a program for you. I think, and David, you can comment on this as well. Hopefully, we'll see an uptick on our programs that offer up to $10,000 in down payment assistance, no matter what occupation you're at. So that's still, a great program, and there's not an occupation, restriction on those. And I'm hoping to see an uptick of those as well. So.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. And I was thrilled the first time I got a spam email about the Hometown Heroes program from a realtor. But during that training, were they trained to say, hey, if their occupation doesn't qualify for this, make sure you know that this is available to you?
Absolutely. Yes, that's a big part of what we're trying to get out there. And I probably could better characterize this as not a brand-new program, but a brand-new product offered in the suite of products that come under the Homebuyer Loan Program's umbrella. So.
And then since this is a loan, the dollars that we get back, is that always going to be required to stay in the Hometown Heroes program? Or can it be used either for other Hometown Heroes programs, or I'm just going to go out on a limb, be used for sale program, which is...
It's my understanding that it's limited to the Hometown Heroes, that we want to make it revolving at some point in time. So not sure, how many years it's going to take, especially now in a rising interest rate environment. The repayments that we get are going to probably slow down. And I think about 7 years is the, average amount of time it takes one of our loans to repay. But Trey, I don't know if
Yeah, I would just add that at this point, we'll keep the Hometown Heroes repayments as separate, and we'll be working with the legislature and the governor in the future as to the future of the program. When the legislature is back next year, we'll have a pretty good handle on how we're doing with the program and getting the money out. I mean, it's pretty exciting to hear that, over 3% of the money is already reserved, and we haven't actually made any loans yet and can't until July 1st. So that's exciting, and I think is a testament to the popularity and the exposure of the program at this point. So that's good news. And then a couple other points to make off of David's is that, yeah, this is an additional menu item. It is technically a new program, but it's kind of layered on a lot of the programs that are similar that we've done in the past. We've gotten one-off funds from the federal government through the Hardest Hit Fund program, where we did quite a bit of down payment assistance. The legislature does appropriate from time to time from the State Housing Trust Fund money for down payment assistance for our housing assistance program that I was kind of alluding to with the 10,000 and other program down payment assistance programs. So, you know, there is a narrative out there that the legislature, you know, either raided or stole money from the Sadowski Trust Funds to fund Hometown Heroes, and that's just a false narrative. I want to make a point that the legislature and the governor, you know, should get credit and kudos for fully appropriating all of the housing trust funds this year, and the $100 million for Hometown Heroes is a part of that, and it's been, you know, similar programs have been in the past funded by Sadowski. So this fits right into those programs, and just want to make that point as well. So, thank you,
Chairman and Director, I'd like to add too, just thank you to the entire FHFC, as well as, of course, the governor and the legislature for passing it, but this has already proven to be very successful. And Director Price, I want to second what you said. It is unfortunate to see certain publications, and even some legislators, mischaracterize it and say that, you know, it was the trust fund was raided, or that certain populations aren't eligible. This is true workforce housing, where we are in fact expanding the eligibility and allowing our nurses, our firefighters, our police officers who may otherwise be priced out of affordable housing the ability to live in the communities that they serve. And that's wonderful. I think that's a great thing. We should be serving that population, but also we are still serving other populations. They're not included in this, as you said, David, this suite, this new product, but there are other products available for everybody. So thank you for clarifying that mischaracterization that we've heard in the media and through others, because that's just unfortunate. I will add that my lender left me a voicemail soliciting information on Hometown Heroes and who else may be eligible, and I'm sure he was doing that to everybody, that all their borrowers, but it's getting out there, and that's thanks and kudos to the corporation for getting that information out there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Board discussion on Hilltop Village and Silver Oaks.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In talking leading up to the meeting today, I had several board members that expressed interest in having a board discussion in regards to these information items, which have been provided by Laura Cox and her staff as an update to where these properties stand on with their tenants and their ability to serve low-income folks. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we might turn it over to Laura to start the discussion and then open it up to the board.
Thank you, Laura.
Sure. So I wasn't really expecting to do that, but we have the item in our board package under information. It's the first asset management item that you'll see. At Hilltop Village, we became aware of the issue, I think from an article in May 2021. Sent First Housing out. First Housing's gone out to do a number of follow-up reviews.
Sorry, could you speak up just a little bit? Just want to make sure everybody hears. Thank you.
Sorry, should I start over? That works better. Okay. First Housing's been back out to do a number of follow-up reviews. The owner has changed the management company. I think it might be effective in March 24th this year. The new management company appears to be doing a better job than the prior one, and they're working their way through all of the units. The number of captures of rodents is still occurring, but not in the same quantities that they had been, and they've had a couple of weeks with 0 captures. We have weekly calls with the owner representative, HUD, and another lender servicer on Southport in total, and on Hilltop specifically. The other item is the Silver Oaks, and that hit the news this year. They'll be changing management companies soon. July 1st is the tentative. They're waiting approval from HUD to make that change. And I understand HUD has started looking through their paperwork that they require when you change a management company. Since it's a management company that HUD has already approved before, that should not be a long process. The review at Silver Oaks has been performed, and management's response is due June 24th. We don't have that one yet. And I know that we have representatives from Southport here if you want to have a discussion with them as well.
Okay. Should we let them? Okay. Well, I know Sandra wants to speak.
All right, I will go first. So I asked for this to be brought up for board discussion. Typically, what's up for board discussion are actionable items. I don't have any action to recommend to the board, but to say that I was displeased to see this issue continue is putting it mildly. And this isn't meant to be an attack on any one developer or any one management company, though right now these two projects or these two developments are with one. But in our informational packet, you know, the first one a year later, still having significant issues. 14 out of 13 units, including 2 that had been previous. Silver Oaks, all of the units that were observed were not in compliance. And so I really wanted to bring this up for board discussion, both one, in recognizing that to me this does warrant a board discussion, to have more than one property that continues to have issues, but perhaps even as a larger conversation, really to everyone. We are all on the same team, and so when we have one development or two development that hits the news for whatever reason, it emboldens every single person that has any kind of NIMBY argument. It taints the entire industry, and to me, really sets us back. We just saw this presentation from the Schimberg Center. We know how bad we desperately need more affordable housing units across the state. And every time we have a development that fails inspection, that is as filthy as some of these developments are now, and it hits the news, whether locally, regionally, or we've got Marco Rubio or someone else that's visiting these properties, it hurts us all. So really, for part of board discussion was to say to the development community, please make sure that you are hiring managers that are competent, that are aggressive, but also to the tenant advocate community. I know right now the tenant bill of rights is hot and heavy, something passed in Miami, something passed in Broward, and I really just want to encourage those conversations to include a tenant bill of responsibilities and to recognize that sometimes these are not management issues, these are tenant issues, and how do we find the balance between holding our management companies accountable but also holding tenants accountable. I recognize and would assume that your industry is facing the same workforce shortage that all other industries are facing. I would imagine a lot of these on-site property management gigs are not very high-paying jobs, and it's going to be hard to recruit. But this makes us all look bad. It makes our job on the board significantly harder. Again, I don't have an action item for the board. I don't know that I have a solution, but to me, it really warrants a discussion, and it really warrants at least a call to action on behalf of everyone to really double down. I know that during COVID, we weren't inspecting properties as frequently as we were because of COVID. And so my concern is, as we start to go back and inspect these properties, that God forbid we see more. And again, I can imagine if it happens in your community, the next time you want to build affordable housing, someone is going to bring that front page paper and say, look at what happens. You know, I for years have always talked about the difference between housing that is affordable versus quality affordable housing that is safe and healthy. And I, for one, as a board member of this corporation, do not want to be aligned with any property or any development that is seen as being unhealthy, unsafe, or not a quality affordable unit. So I don't know if any other board members feel the same way or saw that in the informational items and were as alarmed as I was. But I know that in my call with staff, I really did want to bring it up for board discussion, because to me, if this is a small issue that has the opportunity to get bigger, then forget the billions of dollars that board member Benson brought up. This could make all of our jobs significantly harder. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman?
Well said.
Oh, we can go to Ryan first if you like.
I'll be brief. One thing, I know there's not many mechanisms in place, but perhaps on our FHFC dashboard under rental, we could have a section that talks about number of developments and which developers are currently in non-compliance. So each meeting, as we're evaluating the decisions we're about to make, we have at our fingertips who and how big the issue is, because on there we can see how many units we have in our portfolio, and here we're talking about 231 units. It might give us a picture as we're evaluating decisions, something we can do.
Yep, thank you.
And, yeah, so thank you, Sandra, and board members. You don't have any action items from this particular developer today, or that was on consent, or on any of the action items. But to be forthcoming, that may change at the next board meeting or the one following that. And so there'll be need to be some thinking behind how to treat those requests for moving forward with developments or whatnot as they come to you. So that's one of the things why there isn't an actionable item for you today, but I recognized and wanted to make sure that we had a discussion about that, and the board can decide a couple of different ways to go, and we can talk about that.
Mr. Chair, if I may I just respond to one? When you are looking for new approvals for funding in the credit underwriting report, there's a discussion of noncompliance of the principals involved in each of those deals. So that's in each of those packages.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I think we had previously asked for that to be put in to the summary when there is non-compliance. I think
That's in the credit underwriting report, each one. It has been for as long as I've been with Florida Housing, probably before.
Yeah, so when you have a credit underwriting report from in front of you, you didn't have any today. The developer's compliance would be noted in that credit underwriting report.
Is it one of the? But those are links outside of our packet, and the credit underwriting reports are quite lengthy. I'm just asking if they could, could it be summarized in our dashboard? Those things are like 80 pages of.
I love the idea that Ryan's brought up about transparency and having that. Yes, it's good to have it in front of us if we're approving something, and I'm glad to hear that, because I would question whether a developer that's been out of compliance for over a year and more than one property should receive any future awards whatsoever, and there may be others out there. So we should be able to see that at any given time, let alone when we're looking to approve somebody in the future. But thank you to the board for staying on top of this, obviously, and the corporation, because this is just uncalled for, and it needs to come to an end. So thank you for bringing this up for discussion.
And also, if I may, when there is noncompliance present and it's discussed in the underwriting report, one of the conditions to closing is that noncompliance has to be cured prior to closing.
Great.
Great, but if you could just highlight it, because as was mentioned, it can be buried in a lot of information that we go through, and so it would be nice if it was highlighted, that specific thing, since this is such an important topic.
Okay. My understanding is that the developer is here. Would they like to address any of these items? Okay.
Thank you very much, Board. My name is Mike Molinari. I'm with Southport. We were the original developer on these properties. I'd like to point out I'm actually happy that we have the opportunity to discuss what's been going on today. When we originally had the Hilltop problem, we were in the news because of a rodent issue that was a widespread issue. As soon as ownership heard about it, we gave a blank check order to fix it. I read the audited financial statement yesterday. We spent over $2 million in calendar year 2021 fixing the issue, and I'm pleased to read in the reports for the captures, we've been down to between 3 and 0 for the last 6 weeks. And mind you, with captures, this is baiting rodents in a 200-unit development, and we're getting between 0 and 3. So I'm convinced that we are done with the rodent problem at Hilltop. That is in the rear view. Furthermore, not that it's particularly important, but the school next door, one of the rodent specialists told us that during the COVID shutdown, the rodents from the school next door came over into our property. I didn't really think about it too much because we just had to fix it, but we did fix our side of the street, and as it turns out, you can go look at Jacksonville News 4, they would tell you that the St. Clair Elementary School has had to shut down their cafeteria, has had problems with their schools with rodents over there. Do I think they're particularly bad people, or do they want their children eating with rodents in the cafeteria? Of course not. But there was a particular issue there with that location with rodents, and we have fixed it. We are down to 0 captures weekly, or 1 or 2 with baiting. And in Silver Oaks, there was not a rodent issue ever. Are we doing taking preventative steps there? We are. The unit that was shown and keeps being shown in the news was fixed before it ever even hit the news story, before it ever even hit the cycle. I read the signed off work order from the tenant that everything was fixed the day before the news article ran. We've had a recent inspection out there. We are not on the non-compliance list at either of the properties. We have a cure date of June 24th, I want to say. We plan on submitting the cures for Silver Oaks at that meetings. I'm not sure I've recalled everything that I wanted to say, but we have 80 properties in Florida. Oh, and furthermore, yes, we did fail. The preliminary score on the REAC was a 57C, which is 3 points below a passing score, which on appeal, we plan to be in the passing range. It's for a function of door stops, blinds, and some door jams, but nonetheless, we also don't like being on the cusp of passing versus failing, so we're changing our management company. We changed them at Hilltop, they're changing July 1st in Silver Oaks, and you'll see more and more changes as the year goes on. I guess I appreciate the opportunity to stand up here and say that while we're not happy with anything that's gone on, we have run into these problems with a blank checkbook. We're not running away from them. The rodent issue is fixed at Hilltop. There is no rodent issue at Silver Oaks. And thank you for your time and your consideration.
Okay,
I just have a question.
yeah.
Sure. The issue with the rodent at Hilltop, what are your plans? I know you said you spent $2 million. What are your plans in regards to keeping that problem from reoccurring? You blamed it on the school. What are your plans to keep it from reoccurring?
Sure, well, we went through and we did exclusion work on all the work. So any openings where they were coming in, those have all been fixed. We've implemented housekeeping solutions, and we've resumed our housekeeping inspections. Tenants who do not pass originally are invited to a housekeeping seminar that we teach at the property. We are continuing to pay pest control to do monitoring and to do baiting to make sure that the issue doesn't ever come back.
Chairman. First of all, thanks for being here. I do appreciate you being able to come to answer some questions. You said that there weren't any rodent issues at Silver Oaks. I guess there was a media report that there was a quote-unquote rodent nightmare. Are you disputing that? And I'm not saying the media is always right, so just want to make sure that we're clear.
I believe the article you're referring to, a resident said that they had seen a rodent.
Got it. Okay.
I'd also note that the Florida first housing inspection report had no rodents and it had no black mold in it either.
Okay. How many properties do you have in Florida?
80.
80, okay. And are you seeing similar issues or non-compliance issues in other properties, or just these 2?
No, I can't stand here and pretend that everything's going to be perfect everywhere, but, we've found these to be isolated incidents. We're changing management everywhere. However, we're changing them here faster. We're prioritizing these locations. And I'll also tell you that Silver Oaks and Hilltops are challenging properties to begin with. So, no, we're not seeing it across the board the way we are at these 2.
Is this something that could be prevented? You're spending $2 million in the back end to clean something up. Is it something that could be prevented by putting money in earlier on to prevent something from coming to place?
Even better, I don't think it's a money issue. The problem that, in my opinion, what happened was during COVID, because of the CDC guidance, we were not able to inspect the units. So we didn't. We should have picked it up sooner when the guidance was lifted, but at the end of the day, a lot of residents either didn't file, they either weren't filing work orders, or we didn't get in there to write up housekeeping issues. We are confident with ongoing inspections and enforcing our housekeeping rules that we will not have issues like this in the future.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any public comment? Boy, we wore everybody out. Okay, okay, any
Any
comments?
other
for-
board discussion?
Yes, Ryan?
So good news is that the state of Florida, because of our outstanding leadership, operates this year at an estimated $19 billion surplus, and all I'm asking for is the first $3.5 billion.
I'll
I second that.
Well, thank you, board members, for making the trip to very cool and brisk Tallahassee. We'll
Come
be
here for cooler weather, Trey.
Yes, yes, I'll try and order that up for next time. The next board meeting will be in Sarasota in early August. I think it's August 5th. We look forward to seeing you all down there. We'll be working with Stephanie Sutton and her team to see if we're going to have a development tour or two the prior day. I don't know that we've ever been to Sarasota. There are folks who've been here. I'm getting the no. So I'm excited to spend some time in Southwest Florida and hope to see you all there. Thank you again for your attendance today.
Okay, if there's nothing further, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
See you too. Safe and fly back.